Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Joel here with as many reviews as possible, and today we're doing the review of the Reebok CrossFit Nano 7.0 Weave. The Weave Nano 7.0 is basically just a mid-season update to the original Nano 7.0 that came out in January of 2017. One of the biggest issues with the Nano 7.0 that people complained about was the upper being too rigid, not being flexible, and just being not very comfortable to wear. The brand new Weave upper is engineered seamless, one piece, and now the new Weave pattern goes a lot better with how your foot flexes than the original Nano 7.0 that kind of went against the way that your foot flexes and kind of created all these weird ridges in the toe area that just was not comfortable. The flexibility is better, but I think the most notable change is definitely the amount of space that you have in the toe box. What it feels like is how the Nano 3.0 was wider than the Nano 4.0 and how the Nano 5.0 was wider than the Nano 6.0. The new Weave is wider than the original Nano 7.0. Personally, I did like the more fitted feel of the Nano 7.0, but I would trade the fit of that shoe for the flexibility of the Weave any day. When sizing your Nano 7.0 Weaves, I'm going to say go with the normal Nano size that you've always had. I wore a size 10 in the original Nano 7.0s, and I still wear a size 10 in the Weaves. Granted, the toe box is a little bit bigger, but the measurements otherwise are all the same. The only other change to the Nano 7.0 Weave is the amount of cushioning that the tongue and the ankle collar has. It's slightly improved, but it's very minute and most people aren't even going to notice it. Other than that, the shoe remains the same. You still have the Nano Shell 360 midsole wrap. It's the same exact midsole and thickness, and the outsole that was so good on the original Nano 7.0 is the exact same on the Weave. These are still some of the grippiest shoes and the best shoes to climb the rope in. When it comes to performance of the Nano 7.0 Weaves, I'm going to say that these are still the #1 weightlifting and powerlifting training shoe that you could possibly get. The rigidity of the Nano Shell midsole wrap, the midsole and the outsole combination make for one of the most, if not the most, stable platforms on any just basic training shoe. I prefer doing my Olympic weightlifting and powerlifting in the Nano 7.0s because they're just rock solid. Plyometric movements, gymnastics, burpees, box jumps, double unders are actually okay to do in the Nano 7.0 Weave. Like I said, not a whole lot has changed since the original Nano 7.0. So anything where you only have to move the toe area of the shoe should be okay, but anything past that and the shoe does not flex at all. That being said, the Nano 7.0 Weaves are still the worst nanos to run in and probably the worst training shoe to run in. The rigidity created by the Nano Shell midsole wrap and the TPU heel counter make pretty much anything past the toe area virtually inflexible, and it's almost like running in Olympic weightlifting shoes. So that's how I'm gonna say you should treat wearing these shoes. Treat them as you would Olympic weightlifting shoes, because that's basically what they are. Now, I know a lot of you guys out there are gonna say, what about the upper? Isn't it more flexible? You said it's more comfortable and more flexible, right? Well, yes, it is more flexible and more comfortable, but that was only half of the problem of the original Nano 7.0. With the original Nano 7.0, if you got the upper broken in, then it wasn't that big a deal. The big deal and the big issue about the Nano 7.0 is just how stiff the midsole and the outsole is on this shoe. But until that's fixed, the Nano 7.0 Weave is basically the same exact shoe as the original Nano 7.0. Granted, it's a little bit more comfortable, but it's basically the same shoe. Another really weird thing between these two shoes is that I weighed the Nano 7.0 Weaves to be heavier than the original Nano 7.0s. These weighed in at 12.7 ounces and these at 12.3. It's not a huge difference, but it is an odd difference. So here I have pretty much all the top training shoes lined up against the Nano 7.0, from the most rigid shoes to the most flexible shoes. So the Nano 7 and the Nano 7.0 are definitely going to be the best weightlifting shoes, followed by the Adidas Crazy Power if you have a wide foot. then the Adidas Crazy Power is a pretty good choice. The Nike Metcon 3s are a really good balance of stability and flexibility, but once again they err on the stability side. And then you've got the Adidas Crazy Trains, which are probably my current favorite that you can get, and the Nano 6.0s, which are my favorite training shoe of all time and still are the best training shoe of all time. Right here is where you find the most balance between all of the shoes, between stability and flexibility. These are very good weightlifting and running shoes. To the Noble trainers and the Strike Movement Chill Pill Transits, these are two of my favorites as well. Just really depends on what I'm doing that day and what I'm wearing. And then the Nike Metcon DSX Flyknits, which you can still lift in. I wasn't a huge fan of them, but you can definitely still lift in them. And the Innovate F-Lite 235 V2s, which actually are very stable shoes and very flexible shoes. They just fall over here because they're super flexible. And finally at the end you have the brand new Reebok CrossFit Speed TR 2.0s, which compared to the old Speed TRs are a little bit more soft and a little bit more flexible. And I think that's because they wanted to make a clear distinction between that shoe and the Nano 7.0. Once again, these are all good shoes to train in, but some are better for lifting and some are better all around. The Nano 7.0 weaves retail for $130, which is the normal Nano 7.0 price. And after all the original Nano 7.0s sell out, the weaves are going to be not called the weaves anymore. They're just going to be called the Nano 7.0s. These are going to be how Nanos are going to be done until the new Nano 8 comes out, whenever it does. So currently I would just recommend that you get the original 7.0s. You save $50. The difference in price is not worth the difference in performance between the original Nano 7.0s and the Nano 7.0 weaves. Another thing is that if you have the original Nano 7.0s, it's probably not worth the upgrade to the Nano 7.0 weaves. And if you did not like the 7.0s, then you probably will not like the 7.0 weaves. When it comes down to it, I actually think the Nano 7.0 is a pretty good shoe. It's just not a very well-rounded shoe, and there are other options on the market that are a little bit more well-rounded, though not as good of a weightlifting shoe. I applaud the fact that Reebok took community feedback, they went back to the drawing board, and they tried to fix the Nano 7.0, but in my opinion, it was not enough and it's just a little too late. If you guys have any questions about the Nano 7.0 weave, feel free to leave them in the comments. You can check out the full review at asmanyreviewsaspodsible.com. And as always guys, please hit that like button, subscribe, and thanks for watching.